We are live. Let's just double check that the picture looks like something decent. Yeah, not bad. Okay. Okay. That will be the Kinnos for the Holocaust. Right. As we start Kinnos, I often like to maybe take stock, maybe give some introduction to what's going on, and then go from there. So, the lamentations that we say, the Kinnos that we say on Tisha B'Av morning, many of them have been written by Rebbe Eliezer Kalir, who is what was known as a Paitan, word poet, similar wording, similar things. And basically a lot of it is poetically written. A lot of it has different midrashim intertwined, etc., etc. If you know what it's referring to, sometimes it only refers to or alludes to certain things that aren't written really straight out, but you can understand what it says over there via that. And we are going to be going through different, don't go through all of them. If you want to go through all of them, that would take hours and hours and hours. And those shuls that do them, they go from the beginning to the end. Just to read through the whole thing takes nearly 2 hours. That's without understanding a word that you're saying. So I think what we're going to do is, what we usually do is we're going to choose somewhere between 10 and 12 different kinnos. We're going to choose one specific point from each one of those kinnos, and we're going to want to focus on that point and see what this kinna maybe could teach us for ourselves. One of the other things that I would say is that sometimes on Tisha B'Av, some of the things we say are slightly harsher than we would say them during the rest of the year. I think on a day where we lament the destruction of the temple and we see what it is that we did wrong, it's possible to speak slightly more out of turn. It's possible to say things that maybe during the year might not sound as politically correct. But I feel it's important on Tisha B'Av for us to really get a feel for what's going on and a feel for what the things are that we need to think about, the topics and the themes, and what it would get us towards. So I would like to start today with Kinavav, which we always start with, Shavas Sur Mene Shimoni Oivrai, where he speaks, everything comes to a standstill, turn away from me, those who exiled me and made me hear, so everything stops, and the people who exiled Kaisol say, turn away, they're disgusting, they made me a filth and refuse amongst the flocks of my nation. And then we speak about God, you've enveloped your heavenly tabernacle, that it not see my earthly temple. We speak about the heavenly temple versus the temple on earth. We speak about it at a different time. And you've enveloped yourself so that my words were overpowered, so that, then my enemies clapped their hands in derision and my limbs faltered as I trampled on my heroes. That's the beginning. And then he moves on to the following words. The next paragraph speaks about Jerusalem. Jerusalem has fallen, it remains sunk in the watery depths. My eyes longs for the Zechariah, the son of Rechia, which spoke about the fact that Jewish people returned to Jerusalem. But until we are shown miracles like those of Gilgal, which was great miracles to the Jews, the prophecy has been hidden. My eye brings forth tears because we are crippled by quicksand. He, meaning God, caused the destruction, then regretted it, summoning Israel to cry, saying, over these I weep. And I was thinking about this idea of quicksand. So you've got watery depths, but also my eye brings forth tears because we're crippled by quicksand. Quicksand is a very scary thing. I've never really seen it in the real life, but for those who have, you always see it on in films or in other things where somebody's stuck in quicksand and they slowly start sinking. And there are ways to get out of it, and you have to be helped sometimes. The more you move, the more you sink, etc., etc. But quicksand is a very scary idea. And I was thinking about this quicksand because I had a conversation with somebody recently. And this individual that I had a conversation with, I was speaking to, and we were bemoaning the fact that after Corona, the shul hadn't fully gotten back to normal. Meaning that we got back to normal in the fact that we have many people and we have Kiddushim, and yes, of course, we have a section for people who want to be safe. All that is still part of the new normal. But there are many people that used to come before Corona whom we lost, either due to health concerns, due to the fact that they passed away, but many people left us after Corona. And it was a question of what was I used to and what am I doing now? What's the new normal? So everybody came to shul, I won't say everybody, but those who normally came to shul week in, week out, or maybe once every couple of weeks. And then Corona hit. And when Corona hit, what ended up happening is that there were many people that, or all of us actually, we closed the shul, we didn't come. And then it was 1 week that we didn't come to shul, and another week that we didn't come to shul, and the third week, and the fourth week. And people started to say, you know what? This is actually a lot more comfortable. Why should I wake up at 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning and schlep over to Shrubberies? It's quite comfortable at home. And some people have told me that it was better for them to daven at home. They enjoy the davening more at home. They don't get interrupted by the laning. They don't have people talking. They don't have the rabbi speaking. They don't have the chazan singing. They don't have any of that. The whole thing takes half an hour to 45 minutes. It's wonderful. They can do it. It's very meaningful to them. And they do it every Shabbos morning. They wake up and they do their own davening. That's what some people do. Some people say no. They don't even want to daven anymore. Why should I daven on Shabbos morning? That's also gone out the window. So Shabbos morning has become a day to lie in, a day to go have walks, a day maybe even to go shopping, to go for a walk with a dog, to go for a walk with your wife, whatever it might be, but Shabbos has gone out the window entirely. Some people have given up on Shabbos meals. Some people have given up on the entirety of Shabbos. Some people only have given up on having guests around, because why should I drive myself crazy to have guests? This whole thing, this whole fake, whatever we would call it, socializing. I don't need it. What do I need it for? It was all only happening because I got used to it, because that was the norm. But now that there's a new norm, we don't need it. And unfortunately, you see that there are many, many people who've left coming to shul who just aren't with us anymore for Shabbos. They come maybe once in a while, they have a yard site, maybe they have to do security, maybe some other reason might come for a simcha, but in general, we've lost them. And it was very, very sad. It is still very sad to me to have lost different demographics within the shul. And then this person says to me, but that shows you something, doesn't it, Rabbi? And I said, okay, well, what does it show you? And she says, it shows you that Anglo Jewry is dying. Now, that's very extreme. That's a very strong. She says, well, look around. Look around what's happening. What's going on with Anglo Jewry? Where is Anglo Jewry? And this is not only our shul, by the way. Many other shuls have said that they've experienced the same thing. I'm sure shul attendance in London and across Manchester is down as well. Because in the same way, I don't think we're the only shul where people suddenly decided, hey, wait a second, Saturday morning is much more comfortable than Shabbos morning is, and I don't need to go to shul, and I don't need to hear the rabbi speak, and I don't need to have kiddush. I don't need all those things in my life. And that's only part of it, because it was really just a stark reminder of where we are up to. This shul thing is only a symptom. It's a symptom of a much, much greater problem that's going on within Anglo Jewry. It's a symptom of apathy. It could be a symptom of, lack of education. It could be a symptom of assimilation. It could be a symptom of many, many different things. You look at what's going on at Anglo Jewry and think to yourself, well, are we actually sinking in quicksand? And so quicksand it's not like, you just disappear in 30 seconds as they make it out in the movies. It's a slow sinking, but in the end of the day, at one point or another, it does sink. And on Tisha B'Av, one of the questions we need to ask ourselves is, well, are we actually in quicksand? Are we sinking? Is Anglo Jewry sinking? And give it another 50 years, you can close all the shuls. You can close all of the communities, and all that be left is maybe Masorti and Haredi, maybe a bit of modern Orthodox, vary from modern Orthodox you might find. But what's the future for our shul? What's the future for Anglo Jewry? That's a really, really big question that we need to ask ourselves. And, even the last couple of years, it's been slightly different, but I think one of the real litmus test things is going to be this year, coming up in just 2 months, to a shul near you, coming in the next 2 months. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, join us. Yeah, so it'll be one of those. Are we going, you're going to have to pick up the phone and start calling people and saying, are you going to come and join us for Rosh Hashanah? Whether it's the rabbi, whether it's people in the executive, whether it's members, whoever it is, come back. Because that was one of the last vestiges that people still held dear. People said, whether I come to shul or not, or whether I will come on Shabbos or don't come on Shabbos, come for Yahrzeit, don't come for Yahrzeit, come during the week, don't come during the week. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur was something where everybody was like, yeah, that's what we do. That was part of Anglo Jewry. You came Rosh Hashanah, even if it was only for an hour on Rosh Hashanah, and even if it was only on the first day. But you came for Shofar, you came for a bit of Musaf, and whether you stayed to the end of Musaf or not was irrelevant, but you came. You said, I'm still here, somewhat. And the question is, what will it look like this year? So last year was still Corona. 2 years ago was certainly in the pangs of Corona. So you can say people didn't come, and I spoke to many people and they said, Rabbi, it's just not the time yet. Things are difficult and things are dangerous and it's just not something that we can come to. All right. Whether we accept that or not is a different discussion. I think 2 years ago we could accept it. Last year I think it was a bit of a stretch. This year certainly it's out of the question. People travel, don't have to wear masks anymore. People go places, they don't have to show vaccination certificates anymore. You go to shops, nobody asks you to wear a mask. People go everywhere and anywhere nowadays without even worrying about it. Yes, there are still a few people that, that are quite wary about what's going on with COVID, and those people, if they said to me, shul it makes me nervous on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I'll understand that. But I don't think that's the majority. I think that leaves us with about 5% of the population. But 95% of people have gotten to the point where, when it comes to discussing Corona and how they behave, almost everything, if not everything, has gone out the window. So if everything's gone out the window, so you say to people, come for Rosh Hashanah, and they don't, it's because we've shaken people out of their dream. There was this dream inside their head that said, I have to go to shul on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, at least that. To be Jewish, I have to do that. And to be able to survive the next year. And then they didn't do it 1 year, and they didn't do it a second year. And guess what? There probably wasn't much difference to their year. And they think to themselves, why did I do this for so many years? Why did I go every single year to hear, this duo drive me crazy? I don't need it. Had a good year last year. I had a good year the year before. What do I need it for? For my Judaism? I don't need it for my Judaism. It was fine. My Judaism was just the same this year as it was last year. And my year, maybe some people even had a better year financially this year. Or they had more simchas this year than they had last year. They're like, go figure. Now what? So if that's gone out the window, so what's going to remain? And you look at the intermarriage rates going up and up and up. So the question is, where are we at? It really is an important question to ask ourselves. Are we sinking in quicksand? And if we are sinking in quicksand, and whether it's quick as in 10 years, or quick as in 50 years, or quick as in 100 years, it doesn't really matter. Because if a demographic of Jewish society is disappearing, it's a tragedy. And when you sit on Tisha B'Av and you sit on the floor and you think about what is going on, it's part of what we should be really worried about. Are we sinking in quicksand? Are we going to be left with very, very little to show for hundreds of years of Anglo Jewry? People they'll say, oh, well, there'll be the Charedim will be left over, this will be left over, but there is what to be said for Anglo Jewry as well. Minhag Anglia, and communities that have existed for hundreds of years, and for them to self-destruct. If chas v'shalom they were to be destroyed by outside forces, that's one thing, but to self-destruct is a tragedy. That's what we're talking about, the sinking in the quicksand. Where you stay there and you stay there, and you slowly but surely you're going down and down and down. And it's almost like the frog that they speak about. If you were to take a frog and stick him in hot water, he'll jump out. But if you were to put a frog in hot water and boil the water ever so slowly, they stay there until they get burnt. And that's what's happening to us. And if it is what's happening to us, Tisha B'Av is a day where we need to sit and think and say to ourselves, well, if that's what's happening, what do we do to undo that? Because just to allow it to happen will be terrible. And the people will say in 50 years, you knew this was coming, what did you do to stop it? And we'll say, don't know. Good question. But now it's gone. He says, you're right, now it's gone. And sometimes when you get to the end, if a company goes bust and they call in the people in charge of the company that ran it and they say, what did you do to stop the decline? You saw that the financial sheets were showing that the company is losing and losing and losing more and more money. So yeah, but we still had money in reserves. So we were using the money that was in reserves. Okay, so use that money and that money until the money in reserve runs out also. And once the money in reserve runs out, then you have to declare bankruptcy. But then you have to sit in front of an insolvency practitioner and he says, why didn't you realize that if the money in reserves keeps running out, something's wrong here? Can't keep on losing money like that because at one point or another you will go bankrupt. Well, I thought it wasn't going to happen in my lifetime. There was another 10 or 15 years worth of money in there, so I might as well keep the company running as is. You got to change it around. If you don't want to go bust, you got to change it around. And Tisha B'Av is a day where we need to think about whether we're going bust and how we change it around. So whether it's through more education, or whether it's through getting people to understand, or whether it's even changing ourselves so we can change our children, I don't know. I think the question is better than the answer. But I think the fact that we live in a generation of such apathy should give us what to think about. The fact that we live in a generation where we just don't care. You look at children nowadays, they're so disconnected. You come to shul for a bar mitzvah and you have a row of kids, 15 of them. Sometimes not even from King David, sometimes even from schools like Yavneh. And not one of them is taking a siddur. Not one of them is taking a chumash. And you're like, well, what did you come for? And as the chazan said to me, recently he was sitting and he heard one boy say to another one, he's sitting over here and he heard the boys behind him. I'll go, oh goodness gracious, this is an Orthodox service. These take ages, they take forever. If that's what our kids are thinking, then maybe there's no wonder that they're not really sticking with us. But how do we change that? So yeah, you're right, the davening does take a long time, but there's a reasoning davening takes a long time. And I think, people say, well, let's shave off time off the davening. So if the davening took 2 hours instead of 2.5 hours, I guarantee you they'd still say the davening took a long time. Because 2 hours is shorter for us than 2.5 hours, and we understand what we're doing. But for kids who are not interested, 2 hours is a very long time. 30 minutes is a long time. Like, what am I saying you're doing it for 30 minutes? The bar mitzvah boy spends about 15 minutes doing whatever he needs to do. Other than that, the other 2 hours, an hour and 45 minutes, is a waste of time. Just sitting here. And I walk around the campus finding kids left, right, and center, pulling out their mobile phones, texting, making phone calls. And people parking directly outside the shul. There's no busha left. There's no embarrassment left about that. And then when you say something, they say, this is who I am. And you're judging me. It becomes like about being judged. So that when I do something wrong, if I say you've done something wrong, you're being judgmental. But maybe you did something wrong. No, but you're judging me. And you can't judge me. All right, fine, I won't judge you. Let's say I won't judge you. If somebody was standing in quicksand, I said, you're in quicksand, here, grab hold of me. You're judging the place I'm standing in. I like where I am. Yeah, but you're sinking. Don't judge me and don't tell me what to do. All right, fine, so sink. You don't want me to judge you? I won't. But then what? Then the person is sinking and they're up to like over here in their eyes and they're like, I can't get out of here, help me. And like, I tried to help you. You wouldn't listen because you told me I was judgmental. Now it's too late. Is that where we're headed? And if it is where we're headed, how are we going to change that? How are we going to get out of that quicksand? How are we going to reach out to that next generation and change things? That's a big question. It's really something that should be bothering us. And when you sit on Tisha B'Av on the floor, remember the first year that I ever cried on Tisha B'Av. It's something that even I really struggle with. But there's one year I remember that I had a bunch of girls that came over. Somebody asked me, somebody in a high school said to me, would you be willing to speak to a few girls about questions that they had? I said, sure. And I thought 2, 3 girls. This is a frum high school. This is a Haredi high school. 2 or 3 girls would show up. I had 40 kids in my house. I said, man, what in the world is going on here? Right? What's gone wrong? Why do we have 40 frum girls who are showing up and saying, I don't know what this is all about? What are we doing wrong? And, it really, really hurt me. I remember sitting on a low stool and, saying to my wife, like, if we had a Beis Hamikdash, this wouldn't happen. Because people would know what it's all about. And people would see God. And strangely enough, even though that's not what happened when we had a Beis Hamikdash, somehow that's what we feel should be happening. At least if we had some tangible way of connecting to God and seeing God in our lives, we'd think maybe that this is important, that this is something that we need to engage with. Rather than thinking this is something that our grandparents brought over from somewhere in Europe and they were dumb enough to believe this, but I'm enlightened and so therefore I don't need to do this. We need to break through that. It's sink or swim. That's what it is. We are in quicksand. Whether we like it or not, we are in quicksand. And we can either, in the next 25 years, change the narrative and pull ourselves out of this, or it's going to sink. People have said that the boat has been sinking for a while, but Corona certainly made the hole a lot bigger. A lot bigger for a lot of people. And the question becomes, we need to reverse that trend, because if you don't reverse that trend, then what's going to happen? Who are you going to be left with? You spent years and years building and creating only to get rid of. Somebody told me yesterday about a shul that's up for sale. Not in this country, another country. It's very sad to have communities that have lived there for hundreds of years to get to the point where shul's up for sale. Because nobody needs the building. People spend thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds, millions of pounds on keeping the building going, and keeping the community going, and keeping the infrastructure going, all for what? To sell it off to some kind of developer who'll raise it to the ground and build a block of flats. Because there was no continuity, because they didn't do that. So if we want to not keep on sitting here and lamenting, one of the things is we need to realize that this quicksand is where we are, it is happening, and we are sinking. And unless we start to realize how we get out of this quicksand, we'll just keep sinking, because that's part of the problem being in quicksand. If you do nothing, you continue going down. And nothing is not an option. And I think it needs, really, the heads of the United Synagogue Jury, the Rabbonim, but maybe the lay leaders to get together also and say, what do we do to change this around? How do we change this trend? How do we make sure that this doesn't sink? Because if it sinks, it'll be another tragedy we can lament about on Tisha B'Av. So now I'm going to start Kinna Vav, the first Kinna. We'll say it together out loud. We'll go from there. Shabbat so many shimoni overai, schio moise simon vedrei chaverai, sakois mishkan miskois devirai, sakois uvlugugi beirai, sof kuchaf, umaruai beirai kisilo, kol abiroi, nofloi deinu betzul dechuyo, eini chikisol achazoi memerechyo, ad bilei gilgol chabuyo, eini moiles bionis nechuyo, oso venicham eikol evchyo, venam alei le'anivo ichyo, abenei feroslu betzu chasideo, palgei tzuf, זכרו קראו יסעדהו, פחד חית שלא יתוקף סעדהו, פרצו חזיריה איי חסידהו, פרצו מעשר יול נידהו, פרסות ציון ביודהו, על הציון צדו שוינם אדוני, צפו על ראשי ציון זה דויני, צומסו בנויב לעמוד זה דויני, צויד נוצת לא ירם אדוני, צועק עמי בימי מדיני, צדיקו אדוני, עתו קלי מחבטו מדי אמוני, קרבת בו אלי מאחמוני, קורוסי ליושבי גבעין הם זרמוני, כולי להשמיע בערבי גרימוני, קומי אבוירי בעושה להרימוני, קורוס המבאי הם רימוני, לא מרוח אבינו לא טבח שומרו, רואי זו כי גרסנו אוירום כמורו, רואי זו כי עמול וחס מבויוך כמורו, רפנו ביד רזקל עם כהן כמו אמרו, ראה בנחרידי מגוי אמרו, ראה אדוני כי צלים מאי חום אמרו, השיבנו סיסי שימה לגוי ציוני, שבט Tomre Moitz Ratzerai Leat Kieni, if say Mesharei de Vir Domamulav Iveni, Shamata Zamaris Avechina Tateini, Shachavuva Nadu Chatzotz, Navieni, Shamukin and Chaoni, Kisom Rak de Vaches, Oifanecho, Toshiv Laim Gemul Kios Kazos. Ronecha, the Doiblet Salmonia, say Alzabonecha, Titain La have him, not to say Veninecha, Tikol, Shakiram, Kois, Komois, Bifinecha, Tavoikal Osam, Nevonecha, Tavoy Elsa, Shakilano, Nimvai Hamas, Mechemonialo, Adalach, Vechavahiglano, Zakeno, Hosolaki, Rama Bet no Amhokulano, Zacharadino, Mehayalano. We continue now with Kinnos. Kinnos number 8. So we have over here as we said, every kinnos has different poetic parts to it. We have the word mi yitain. Who would give me? Who would give that I would, and then fill in the blank. And there are many different verses that says mi tain. And over here we say, I would lament until I soar to the spheres of heaven. I would make the heavens lament with me. I curse the day on which I was twice destroyed, i.e. the two Batei Migdash. I would lament mi tain roishimayim. Here's the first verse that we have, mi tain roishimayim. It's a verse in Jeremiah. Right? Then you move on to again, the next paragraph goes through Eshag, I would scream out, meet Nani ba midbar, who would put me in the midbar. That's again from Jeremiah. Further down, Arosha then is going from the Tov to the Shin to the Reish, meet Nani Shomir Vashayis. It's from Isaiah. Mi'iten Yodatim Sa'eu from Job. Keeps on going, Mi'iten. Who would give that I would, and then fill in the blank, whatever it is. And we speak over here again, we're lamenting about the fact that, who would give that it should be, etc., etc. And the first one is Mi'iten Roshimaim. I wish my head was made out of water. So what that means is I wish if it was made out of water, then I would cry, and if I cried, I could cry as much as I wanted to. Because if it was made out of water, it would be very easy to keep going and going and going. The problem is I only have a limited amount of tears, limited amount of feelings. But it's sort of wanting. And the tragic idea that I think, one of the ideas that is within this kinnos is the idea of wanting. And the idea of wanting to cry. There's a famous story that they tell. There was a Rebbe. The Rebbe was, he said once to Hasidim, he said, I thought to myself, I'd really like to do teshuvah, whatever it is. And then he thought to himself, he says, do I really want to do teshuvah? If I really wanted to do teshuvah, wouldn't I have done teshuvah already? So can I say that I really want? The things that we really, really want in life, usually we go after them. You really, really want something, you'll do more, but you'll work hard. You put in your time and effort. So if you're not, if I want to and I'm not, so then I need to ask myself, do I really want? And the Rebbe thought a little bit more and he says, you know what? Maybe I can't say that I want desperately, but at least I want to want. I want to be in that situation where I would be desperate to do it. I wish I would get to that. That's an important thing. And I think when it comes over here to crying over here, we should be crying on Tisha B'Av. The fact that an entire generation can sit on the floor, and very, very few of them can even shed a tear, one, forget about crying properly, shed one tear, is very, very sad. It shows how we're disconnected. My guess would be that in 1945 and 1946 and even in 1950, when people sat on the floor on Tisha B'Av, they understood what Tisha B'Av meant. Oh, they knew full well, whether it was people who had lost entire families, or people who knew everybody around them, survivors with tattoos on their arms. They knew exactly what it meant to have a Tisha B'Av. And we don't. So Baruch Hashem, we don't know what it means, destruction of Jewry. But on the other hand, it should give us cause for thought, so that means we just don't understand this. And so we all sit low, we sit in shul, and the rabbi speaks for hours and tries to do Kinnos and tries to get everybody going and tries to maybe inspire people to cry. But in general, most of us are not moved by it. And even if we're moved by it, there is quite a threshold between being moved by something and actually crying about it. You watch something or you hear something. If you hear a poem and it's very moving, you go, oh wow, that was very moving. But how often have I heard something and I've literally cried? That's rare. It's got to go past that threshold. It didn't only just move me, it really moved me. And that's hard to get to. And so we are in that situation where we might be moved. Maybe we're not moved at all. Even if we are moved, we're only moved slightly. Certainly not moved to tears. But I think this Miyit and Rosh Yimayim is a call that we should say, at least I should want to cry. Maybe I don't cry, but at least I should have the ratzon. I wish I could. I wish I could get into those feelings, tap into them and use them, rather than just having them lying around inside me. I wish I really could feel it. I wish it did matter to me. I remember having conversations early on, before I got married, early on in my marriage, and part of what you're told is, if it's important to your wife, it's got to be important to you, right? It's part of chosn lessons. If your wife thinks it's important, then it's got to be she says in the morning, do you like this dress or that dress? Do I care less? Just put something on, let's get going, right? But if you say that, you should be like, what are you talking about? I've asked you a question. You're not interested in what I wear? You're not interested in how I look? You couldn't care less? So if you have a man that's dumb enough, he says, do I really care? I don't care. You look good in whatever you wear, just put it on and let's get going. It takes ages for you to get to the car. Let's just go. Right? But don't try this one at home. Right? That's not a good idea. Why? Because it's really important to your wife. And what you need to be taught is what's really important to your wife has to be really important to you. Right? You got to learn it's got to be important. Yeah. I've got to realize it is important. Yeah. If I just say, oh, it's not really that important. Whatever's going on in the background. So, okay. But tears are very, very important. Feelings are very, very important. And we've unfortunately almost shut down on feelings. A lot of people don't like to feel because it makes them feel vulnerable, whatever it might be. I remember I told this once to a friend of mine, and he was laughing and laughing. I was like, it's not funny. He goes, no, it's hilarious. I said, no, it's not funny. I told him I went to a funeral, and the son of the person that passed away, I don't remember if it was a man or a woman that passed away, and I said to them, would you like to speak? Oh, no, Rabbi, I'm not going to speak. I said, no, but it's your mother, father, why don't you say something? I said, no, I wouldn't want to do that. I said, why not? He goes, I might cry. I was like, what? What is that supposed to mean? I might cry. Your parents just passed away. I sure hope you'd cry. I might cry in public. So, where's the embarrassment in that? We become like, I can't feel anything. I'm not allowed to. Had people come over to me sometimes. We've had instances where we've had levayas that have been very, very sad. We don't need to go through different examples, but we've had levayas that have been very, very tragic. And at times, even those levayas have cried. And have people come over to me and say, Rabbi, you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Like, no, but I saw you weren't holding up. I said, yeah, it's sad. Right? Nothing wrong with crying by a sad levaya. Why do I need to apologize or excuse myself for getting emotional when somebody young has passed away? That's something I need to ask you the question, what's wrong with you for asking me if I'm okay? You should understand. That's normal human behavior, to feel emotions. And we are so dead that we nearly don't feel emotions. And tears are very powerful. They're very, very powerful things, and they shouldn't be wasted. Unfortunately, some of us do waste them. A lot of us waste them. You watch a film and it's very moving. I've seen people sit and cry at movies. I think my wife told me that her father told her that when Fiddler on the Roof came out, everybody went to watch it, and she said at the end of the movie, anybody Jewish just sat and cried. Everybody cried at the end of Fiddler on the Roof. Whether you were a man, whether you were a woman, if you were Jewish. I don't know if non-Jews cried so much about that. But Jewish people who watched that city suddenly disappear and everybody had to pack up and watch Tevye the milkman and how his daughters married out and the Haskalah and everything else and the unhappiness and the shtetl, and it all came apart. Men, women, everybody cried. Which on the one hand shows, okay, they were maybe more in touch, but on the other hand, is that what we waste our tears on? A film. Because they've done a good job. Hollywood or wherever they are, they like to elicit emotions. They're in the business of emotions. So whether they're in the business of making you happy, or sometimes they're in the business of thrilling you, you watch a thriller, sometimes in the business of making you sad or making you feel romance, they try to create a perfect setting. So they add the music to it, and the cinematography is perfect, and the people that are acting are excellent at what they do, and you get a picture and it's really live and you feel it. It's like, wow, look at that. But what a shame to waste tears on that. Because that's fake. That never ever happened. That's somebody else's dream that they were able to put together into a little box that you could watch, and they can turn on that. And then when the real things happen, the things that we should really feel about, can't do anything. Can't feel that same feeling. And who would give that that I could turn my head into water? I could just turn on that tap and I would cry. Yes. So I'd like to share with you one story. And then we go into that Kinnos. A very moving, powerful story that I read in the book Just One More Tear by Rabbi Sparrow. And he writes over there that there was a young boy that was in his school, and he was doing all right up to a certain point. And they got to a certain year, I think it was year 4, year 5, and things started getting more difficult for him. And the young boy started falling and slipping behind, and he wasn't a happy camper. Was not happy. He would come home, feel unhappy, and the teachers were frustrated with him, and he was frustrated with himself, and the parents were frustrated, and it just wasn't going. And one day, the boy comes back into school, and he's on the ball. Suddenly he's got it. The Rebbe says something, he asks a question, the Rebbe asks another question, he got the answer. And it's not just one day, it just keeps on going. This kid seems to have changed. And the Rebbe can't believe it. He says, what in the world happened over here? How did this child change around so drastically, suddenly? So he picks up the phone and he calls the mother. He says to the mother, I want to know, what did you do? What did you inject this kid with suddenly that he comes in happy and he's able to function and he's able to keep up, and suddenly he's a different kid? And she said, when you have a child at home that's unhappy, very strange saying, you're only as happy as your unhappiest child. And it's true. He said the whole house was affected by the fact that this child was so unhappy. And my husband davened and I davened and we cried and he cried and just wouldn't go. Nothing was happening. And at one point or another, I said to this young boy, he said, you know what? I had an idea. Once a week, I daven and I cry for my children. I had lakas neros. When I light candles, when the wife lights candles, she stands behind, she covers her face. Many, many women daven for the children then. Many women cry for the children then. And she said, why don't you stand next to me this Shabbos, and I'll daven for you, and you'll daven, and let's see what happens. And she said, this young boy, whatever his name was, stood next to me, and I lit my Shabbos candles, and I covered my face. And I looked down at this young boy, and he's crying. He's crying bitter tears. He says, I'd love to succeed. And she said, my heart broke and I burst into tears. And I'm crying and he's crying and I was davening for him over there and he was davening. And it only took a minute or two. But when we finished, I gave him a hug and I felt something had shifted. And that Monday he showed up in school and things were different. Because tears are extremely powerful. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us tears to be able to do things that regular things can't do. You break through barriers with tears that nothing else can do. And when we say, Mi yitin rosh shimayim, I wish that my head was made out of water. I wish I'd be able to cry, because if I were able to cry like that, do you know what power lies within that? It's not just, oh, now he feels it. It's not only that we feel it. Tears are extremely powerful. They're extremely powerful tools for ourselves. There have been many times where you felt really sad. I think about times that you felt really sad. And then you cried and you felt much better. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us this wonderful mechanism of taking these emotions that are inside us and being able to somehow process them. And how it works, I don't know. You'd have to ask psychologists how exactly it works. But the tears come out and suddenly you feel, you know what, I had that good cry, I feel better. It's just come out and it's done something for me. It shifted something where I felt stuck before. I don't feel stuck now. It's a beautiful present from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to allow us to cope with emotions that are so strong that we don't know what to do with them. Overbrimming and overflowing emotion. And you take that emotion and you channel it correctly and you channel it toward HaKadosh Baruch Hu and you say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, your Beis HaMikdash is destroyed. This is a tragedy. And I sit on the floor and I lament the fact that we have that. And I want out and I really feel it. That's extremely powerful. And mi yitin rosh shimayim, if I could just get myself into the situation where even one tear would come out. Because what a difference that one tear would make. And how stuck we are today that we just don't cry. So as we read this Kinnos, sure, none of us will necessarily cry from it, but at least we should have the ruts and we should wish I could actually cry tears. Adat chok shamayim aleiti shamayim oyam achivi pamayim ashanei miteno shimayim avchin mivchi leil midbo evchano leim midbo umidbo mimidbo avakeiti oilas midbo eshag mitneni vamidbo ego daven oshekin noikim zayis agoreiti kobnei vayis egoim sheyama balabayis aroshem mitneni shomir vashayis adve bechol leib leamtzieni edo omilin bom leamtzeinu ed agaye oi evelim seyu akinen mitenyo Atimem Sayu, Elf Koves Abakoi from Milai, Egevonim Lesanoy Samolai, Ao Heres Samilagia Lemulai, Etzach Mitenoi Foi, because of Miloi, Oirach Mishpetego in Veali, Oidia Bebitium Ali, Lulu, Mazalois Bekoim Ili, Efemitain. Shemeli, Ozok Yufro Avioino, Eskio, Simehutano, Azil Belogim, Kibrei Hoeliono, Eoemitain Li Evekayoino. Och nivsham chias ois el tzoy, och ublimayim aflat tzoy, och hatz komoy zikzoy velois liftzoy, och sicho miyavileini irmotzoy. Et haolei abadni metzal moves, och tuso eshkoin ad chatzam moves, et ofeles amchakim lemoves, en emi geve yichye velo yire moves. Eyo lo siles o sitati chazois, ayo mosi b'chol shono emeres hira shono azois, ayada lakoil ki muda azois, im loy ki ad adonoi osaso zois. Ekov lecha rosh adonoi cheli, echa lecha bech lechatei machli, ach lecha b'shir mishirei mecheli, achabein miten kerocho kerochli. Ad ishkach tzakas Ariel, Elov lego Yudav Yisrael, alfei shinon, Hashamas ha'ele, mitei mitzion, Yishuas Yisrael, Yisrael me'etz midrachai lo elochu azovuni, v'azavtim ufanayim em nebochu, v'ganti ve'elati me'ayin v'ibin ishbochu, eicho divatim, erashesai, ishlichu. We're going to do one more kinna, after which we're going to finish off the davening. And then anybody who would like to stay for longer, we got plenty more where that came from. So we move on to Kinnos number 10. So skip one, this is number 9. We move on to Kinnos number 10. And in Kinnos number 10, how did the rose of Sharon sit alone? And the joy has been silenced from the mouths of those who carry the ark. V'no mimishmeroisam kahanim na'aron, and the Kohanim, the sons of Aaron, were removed from their watches. Kinimsa abayis mimsarvim aron, when the temple was given over to the rebels of Aron. We had, in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, you had what was known as Mishmaris Kahuna. Mishmaris Kahuna were the groups of Kohanim. The Kohanim didn't all come just as one big group to Yerushalayim. Rather, the way it worked was the Kohanim was split into 24 groups, and those 24 groups, were 24 families, and each family got 2 weeks in the year to be able to serve in the Beis Hamikdash. So that's the time you didn't serve in the Beis Hamikdash. So you came up for your week, you did your service, you went back down from Yerushalayim, and then like 24 weeks later you came up again, and then during the Shalosh Regalim, then you'd have people really sort of, all the Kohanim, we needed all hands on deck. But other than that, every family had their own way of doing things. So that's it, and we go through over here, through the different Mishmaras. As you see at the end of each one of the paragraphs, you have Morain as one of the families, Tziporim, people from Tzipori, Mifshata, Aisaloi. There were different, you go through the different people, it tells you the places they were from, and the name of the Mishmar that was lost. And we start off this, we speak about over here, very early on within this Kinnos, just find it. Here we go, third one. Godsa me'arza, kana mekushata. She was exiled from a land, a bride full of jewels. Ba'avoin masros u'shmita, because of the iniquity, the sin of the tithe and sabbatical year. Uva'amash shvatim u'shpata. She was condemned to suffer 4 types of afflictions. U'me'edyo hufshata, from her ornaments she was stripped. Mishmeres mifshata, the watch of mifshata, which was another one of those watches that we spoke about. So we see over here the Avera of Maser and Shemitah, and I want to just discuss the idea of Maser and the idea of Shemitah very briefly to understand what it is and understand the Avera of it, and maybe see if there's anything we can do to sort that out. The idea of Maser in the times of Beis Hamikdash, when you grew your produce, you had to give 1/10 of that produce. 1/10 had to go to the Levi, another 1/10 had to come with you up to Yerushalayim, and you had to eat that in Yerushalayim, or instead of that second 1/10, sometimes it had to be given to poor people. But there is also, so that's the idea of Maser, of giving a tithe, of giving 1/10, but that idea has also spawned another 1/10, which is Maser Ksofim, 1/10 of your income. And Chazal said, listen, we need to make some kind of set amount or minimum amount that people should give to tzedakah. How much should people give? You have to give charity. So you give £1, that's probably too little for most of us. 100,000 pounds, most of us couldn't afford to give that. So where do you put yourself? How do I know what I should give? So Chazal said that we should try to create a baseline. And this baseline, depending on who you are and depending on what you can afford, whether it's 10% gross or 10% net of your income, for most people it'll just be 10% net of your income. So you look at your income, whatever it might be over the year, you take out your main expenses, your food, your bills, everything else that you have to add to that. Forget about holidays and all the extras. And you say to yourself, okay, I'm left with, let's call it 10,000 pounds just for ease of use. After all is said and done, I'm left with 10,000 pounds that I spent on extras for myself, for all sorts of other things. Of that, 10% should go to tzedakah. 1,000 pounds a year should be going to tzedakah. And that should be our baseline. And I think one of the things that we've lost is the feeling of charity and how much we should or shouldn't be giving. And we should be making calculations and saying to ourselves, well, how much do I earn? How much can I afford to give? How much am I spending on myself? And how much am I spending on God? How much should I spend on supporting, whether it is charities, whether it is shuls, whether it is poor people trying to make weddings? There are plenty of things that people need money for. Unfortunately, we have so many needy people that no matter how much money you'll give, we'll probably never really fill that barrel. But how much are we giving? And this is the avoin ma'asros, the avera of meister. Meister is important to think about. When you think about Ma'aseh at the time of the Beis HaMikdash, you gave a tenth, which I think even when it's not the time of the Beis HaMikdash, the correct thing to do is to figure out. Now again, it's a question of affordability. If it's something that you can't afford, that's one thing. But that's already not a question of priorities, it's a question of affordability. Okay, so if I can't afford it, I can't afford it. Then you don't have to give your 10%. But if you can give it, even if you can give it 10% net of everything that's left over at the end, then that should be something that we're looking to do. Because we left Mitzrayim, we left Yerushalayim, Ba'avoin Masros. And the other thing is Shemitah. This year is a Shemitah year. Kosh Baruch Hu put Shemitah in the year and he says, I'm giving you the land, but the land belongs to you only if you keep the 10th, the 7th year. Every 7 years, you don't plan. He says, well, what am I going to do? And God says, I'll take care of you. But I want you to know that this is my year. And in the same way, if you have an area that if you leave it open for too long, it becomes a public footpath, and you're not allowed to close it anymore. So what do? If you have an area, if you have a shortcut that people take all year round, what you do is, every once in a while, you shut the gate. And then people go, hey, what happened? It's closed. And you put on a sign, you say, this is not a public footpath, this is a private footpath, and every once in a while I close it to remind the public that this is mine. And so long as you do that, it never becomes a public footpath. If you leave it open, I don't know what the legal definitions would be. You'd have to speak to the solicitors. But legally speaking, if you left it open for too long, it would become something that would become public property, and it wouldn't become your property. It wouldn't be your property anymore. And God says, I've given you the land of Israel. It's like a public footpath. But I shut the door once every 7 years to say it's mine. And so when that means, recently I went shopping and I bought potatoes and I brought them home. And I thought to myself, Maris Piper potatoes. Who's going to get Maris Piper potatoes from Israel? Well, Aldi does. I knew they had the little potatoes, but I didn't know that Maris Piper actually come from Israel as well. I thought Maris Piper was a British variety. So I was very surprised. We saw my wife had already started peeling half of the bag, and I'm like, uh-oh. She said, what? What happened now? I said, well, stop where you are. Those are Israeli. She said, Israeli? Oh gosh, they're Shemitah. Fine, you have to put them all together, we have to let them rot, and only then you can chuck them out. You can't buy Shemitah produce at the moment. Yeah? But supporting the farmers that are keeping Shemitah in Eretz Yisrael. I was just recently, Heaton Park did a fundraiser for Shemitah farmers. I thought to myself, it's interesting to find even more traditional shuls willing to support farmers who are Shemitah farmers. And I think we should be supporting. We should be supporting Israel, and in supporting Israel, it's not just the Keren Kayem or the UJIA. Support farmers who are giving up an entire year's worth of money, and maybe more than that, to be able to keep Shemitah. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, that is what I want to happen in my land. That's part of the deal. You want the land of Israel, this is how you're going to get it. You don't just get to use it and then as much as you want to. It comes with rules. It comes with an instruction booklet. And that instruction booklet, part of that is Shemitah. And so we read about Ba'avoin, we read over here, that you have the bejeweled bride exile from a land, Ba'avoin Masros to Shemitah, with the Averis, the iniquity of the tithe, the sabbatical year. Time for us to think about that also. It's not only it happened then, there is what to be done now, and if we can, we should try and set that straight. Echo Yashua Chavas Hashem Medama Amroin Mipni Nasa Aroin Venom Mishra Sam Kanim Ne Aroin Kinim Sa Bais Bimsamei Aroin Barais If Gem Chumash Sevarim Kena Koim Venovi Biyam Giborim Vadomai Nishchatu Perachim Tzkit Tzvirim and Noda Git Zvirim Kanei Tziporim God Sam Yatzor Kala Mikushoto Bavoin Masroz Ushmito Vamas Shevotim Ushboto Med Yov Shoto Mishmas Mifshoto Tachech Hoshem Moki Nifratz Kosloi Vameil Nikra Kenikra Besiloi Horad Voshma Mitiloi Venomish Ziloi Koin Aisoloi Hoyovim Alivim Elechem Elechem Givitlu Aloi Vozraim Lechem Vo'avo Mo Maimaim Milechem Guvtulu Shtei Alechem Ibeis Lechem Vayetzeada oim bakesem nechbas utmo efal roy shoy khivas ben herois nikhbu men hero nikhbas ke fashu belechem ufas nel keda yot pas zachas manash nasem nishma shivo vata bainois amen la yabu lan avaray sub overavu ketsu behul avu kane ailevu khayd gadra vamal elizael biliga vesita ab khayzael abu kain hukna ab magizael vayetsem oin el kefauziel Thomas וחניפו תבל בנעלו רב חובל בנון רב חובל רגלוב כאובל ואין מסקרבל וכהני ארבעיל יודוי ורסו בבית סבול כי חלו יוכו יבלי כדוי המבול כי זוי הישריס לחיבול וניבול ויצא בחבל כבול כהן כמול כל עמו כהננו קינו כי חיסו לאל קנו וגוינו ולא ישם קינו ונולדו מקינו משמרס על קונו לא נמרואים עין צבס וחסף על חרס חיפס וחיזוק מוסר חופס ונרס בס כהן צבס ממרואים משמיע נילי סיטה אוין והיקני בעברוין ושיגעוין וכאן עלי אבוין נוי וגיבוין ונעמי מאוין משמרס בס כהן מאוין מסקד אויל אבוין מניחו כי הושבתי אנו נעמי בלי אב ונמנעתי מלצפצף במנימוג ונשאו עלי קינה משמרס ישב אב סילו אמירי מרי הוירויו ולא נקרא לי הכנס מריו ומרוי מרד ומריו הוצגו אירוי מריו משמרס מעדיו על גבי חורשו חורשים הריחו מעניס הריקו עלי חרב וחניס ובייסי צומויס וסעניס מצורס תוכניס יוצאו יבוניס פרסו ואין יות שולח כי לא יאמינו בהשכם ושולח ושבסו בריס מלך ואין שמן ממולך בראש ממלוך צדיקו אדוני כפי ומורס ורוח רוח עד היסוד בו הוא הרס ותמויה עוזי וזמרס כי נימולה נחס וקצבי ארץ נזרס נצרס קורסי לצורי כלי לא יאורה וכוננדי ביער בערב וחבון נחד אליך במערב ורחל הרב מחלו אורם ראה כי הוסעתי קוניו בסניו בניו וכל גצוין לטבח מנויו ונאום חנויו מגדל נוניו שמו כי יוצא סיבה שביו ונשרפו נס מורים שבויו והושעתי נשמו ואבוביו ומסתר חבויו נודו בייס חביו שמו כי נזהמתי בצחנו בסוסה מני תירינו ולא נסן לי רחמים וחנינו מקריאס חונו נאו כפיו חנו טוב ועשו מוני אדומים ושוסו שערי שמימים וישיבו כל יומין ובאים סלים נאו גינסוין צלמין טוב סמריח וחושקי תזריח וחדש עצמי סין נבריח ויחנו ניחנו כי קדם תוריח ושולחו תאריך שולי חמאס אוריח. Ian. So we're going to stop now. We're going to finish the davening and then afterwards what we're going to do is for those who want to stay we'll have more kinnos as well.